Good evening to you both, and let's begin with the leader of the Parti Québécois traveling to our province with a message of shared frustrations over federal overreach.
We cannot influence that parliament, and we cannot cope with those policies.
Paul St. Pierre Plamondon told a gathering at the University of Calgary Thursday that if elected premier next year, he'll lead a third referendum on Quebec's independence, citing agreement with Danielle Smith's demands for more provincial rights and less federal interference.
She played her cards very well. Doesn't mean I agree with Danielle Smith on everything, but the purpose of a parliament is to give a voice and some coherence to your people's will.
But even deeper to the discussion was the expression of differing views on university campuses, dialogue that comes in the wake of Wednesday's fatal shooting of U.S. conservative activist Charlie Kirk.
We're not here to endorse. We're not here to promote anything other than the ability to talk about things that might be controversial.
And although controversial, the Parti Québécois leader reiterates any future move toward sovereignty must first come through democracy. Karen, how much of a political bridge do you see being built between Alberta and Quebec?
I don't think that there's a lot of topics that Alberta and Quebec are going to agree on. I think that in this case, it's just a question of, is there going to be a referendum in 2026? And I think that is kind of unlikely, thinking about the Parti Québécois being in fourth place in the National Assembly in Quebec with having only 6 seats. They're not official party status. And I think that's similar to what's happening here in Alberta with the separatist movement being a loud voice, but not necessarily a representative voice. So I think that it's good that people are having these conversations. And sure, it's great to come and have that conversation. But Alberta and Quebec sit so far apart in so many different political spectrums. So I imagine it's more of a let's talk separatism talk than it is an olive branch, let's say, between Alberta and Quebec.
Danielle, what do you make of the state of dialogue on university campuses around differing political views? And should a Quebec sovereignist be addressing students in our province?
I mean, why not? I've always said, temperamentally speaking, there's a lot that Quebec and Alberta have in common, although we might not have the same political goals. Temperamentally, there's some real similarities there. You know, there are groups that don't like being told what to do. I think that, you know, the murder of Charlie Kirk has really thrown us at the university, as well as it's just like people who give their opinions in public are having to think about what this means, and are we seeing this normalization of violence, and what should our reaction be to that? I think it's still something, I mean, his funeral is just today. It's still something that I know I'm personally processing.
All right. Well, we heard from Alberta Municipality's president and Wetaskiwin Mayor Tyler Ganem off the top this evening. He spoke of efforts encouraging Albertans to run for municipal councils and overcoming hurdles, even hesitancies that may be keeping some potential candidates from taking the plunge. Danielle, does pursuit of the mayor's chair or a seat on municipal council carry the same appeal that maybe it did 10 years ago? What do you make of having to encourage Albertans to step up?
Yeah, I think that we're seeing, as your interview showed, that there's this real hesitation to run, but also this real concern about what it means. So in an age of a lot of misinformation, of local news not necessarily being able to cover stories in the way that they traditionally did, we see people really facing a lot of backlash. Think of 15-minute cities, for example. People really latched onto that as a conspiracy theory, and the idea that we're all going to be forced into these little districts. And if you're a person who's in municipal office, it's really quite a headache to have to deal with. So I don't blame people for being hesitant. But I think it is a really rewarding job. I mean, I know that city councilors in Edmonton, and although they get tired and burnt out, they really do see the change that they can make. And for some people, that is inspiring enough to take it forward and actually run for office.
Karen, how big of a leap do you think it is to go from being a concerned citizen to making a bid for elected office?
Yeah, it's a huge leap. I know I consider myself a community activist, and I don't know how I could ever really jump into the political game. I just think about people and their histories, their lives, the things that they think that's not necessarily what you get to go and talk about when you're on city council, right? It's more about representation of the people who have voted for you. And earlier, Mr. Gandam mentioned also think about the long-term vision of your community. So maybe what decisions that you actually make may not necessarily fit well with what your own political views are. So I think that for a lot of people, it's a huge step to try and go into something like political office, but maybe the better thing to do is take a very small leap and write a letter to an elected public official. I promote this all the time. Writing a letter to a councillor, to an MLA, to an MP is something that has to be responded to, and it's a great way to get yourself involved politically.
Danielle, Mayor Gandam was essentially reaching out to people who are already in some form or fashion community leaders. Do you think it takes a special kind of person to actually take on a role of being a councillor or a mayor?
I don't know if it's like a special person is the way that I would put it, but I do think that people have to be driven by multiple issues. Like I like that Mayor Gandam talked about the way that if you're a single issue voter, you're going to get very bored because, if you're looking at the expansion of a wastewater treatment plant, well, how does that connect to bike lanes? How does that connect to funding? And if you like taxation, you have to really be able to grow and be willing to grow and listen. So those are certain skills that I think you would need. But I think, the more normal a person is, the more I would like to see them in politics, actually. If we kind of insist that there's this special skill or this elite skill, then we're going to see people who are only there for the sake of power. And that's not necessarily the people that we want to represent us.
Technology ban from much of Alberta is making a return to the busiest intersection in Camrose.
A lot of traffic goes through here. The intersection safety device is going to be re-implemented.
That being a speed on green camera, something prohibited previously by the province.
This is a historic day for Alberta drivers as we turn up the heat, we fire up the grill, and say goodbye to the photo radar cash cow.
Late last year, the government reduced photo radar by 70%, limited to school, playground, and construction zones. Speed on green cameras were eliminated altogether.
The switch has always been on. We just don't process any violations. We have statistical information and data that shows that since the cameras have been turned off, speeds have increased.
After the cameras were installed in 2020, crashes went down 20%. This year, however, the collision rate at the intersection is on pace for a 133% increase. Statistics included in a business case presented to the province to bring automated enforcement back.
It's nice that we've had the inroads to reinstitute it, and it's just trying to make everybody safe. That's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to make a cash cow out of it.
Calgary Police also announced this week 3 intersections in that city will see a return to automated enforcement. Karen, is there something to be said for keeping the cameras on? What do you make of Camrose getting the green light to use technology to once again crack down on red light offenders?
Yeah, I'm happy. I don't like photo radar per se, but I am happy with the concept of actual evidence being used to base your policy on. So they turned the cameras off, they saw an increase. Before it was like statistics were just being pulled out of nowhere or anywhere to say, oh, it's making things safer. So what I do appreciate is at least now that evidence and those statistics are going to be what is used to make it a targeted approach for safety. I see things like in school zones where they have physical traffic calming measures. And sometimes that's what's really important too, is it's not just about enforcement, but also how can we make things actually safer? Although I know those like boundaries on the road that they've made, I sometimes crash into. So I might be going slower, but at least it's safer in that sense. But then there's more obstructions in the road.
Danielle, what do those statistics generated in Camrose say to you about road safety and enforcement in Alberta?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we have the statistics and we have like the lived reality of driving in Edmonton, where I can tell you certainly that the cameras not being there have created like a lot higher speeds on a lot of the roads that I typically drive on. I think this is something that we did see coming. There have been traffic studies that have shown, of course, reduced speed equal reduced collisions, reduced deaths. I think back to a failed policy in Edmonton where it was an attempt to move all speed limits to 30 kilometers instead of just school zones. They're at 40 now, and that actually did show a decrease in the amount of collisions. So just a lower speed gives you more response time. And if people are not, if they feel like that there's no consequence and they can drive at whatever speed they want, then they're going to drive at a higher speed.
All right, next up, a new class is proving popular at Bev Facey High School in Sherwood Park.
My old school didn't offer any mechanics program, so I actually switched this year just for the mechanics program.
And it's not just any mechanics class, but one catering specifically to female students.
I used to take construction, that sometimes boys can be judgmental if you don't know the stuff right away, and that's really discouraging and makes I didn't want to try as much in construction because I just felt like judged and stuff like that. So I really appreciated this. All the girls have been so wonderful and kind.
This is the first year for the program, driven forward by teacher Steve Milton.
That there's been 1, 2, 3 girls in the class, and they've been telling me that a lot of other girls want to take the course, but they don't necessarily feel comfortable coming into an area that's male dominated. Change a tire, change a flat tire, or knowing what's happening on your vehicle. We all own a vehicle. That little bit of knowledge goes a really long ways.
36 girls have signed up so far for the course. Danielle, how do you feel about moving away from a co-ed environment and opening the doors to a whole different student dynamic?
Well, I'm glad to see that the girls feel like it's a good learning environment. I go back and forth depending on what the data gives us about gender segregation in learning. So this morning, just for fun, I was looking at a meta-analysis of over 1 million people that showed that there wasn't really a statistically significant difference on academic achievement, but that of course doesn't translate to something that's specifically skills-based. So I suppose it depends what our outcomes are when we want to have if you want to see more women become mechanics, then they're going to be graduating and going to more male-dominated spaces anyway. So it seems like there would be a need to have some comfort built there in high school rather than the solution being to segregate people.
Karen, what do you make of the degree of demand for this particular program and maybe even the potential it brings?
Yeah, they said that about 36 young ladies have signed up for this program, so that's great. I love the idea of construction, hands-on learning. I agree with Danielle, though. I think that we should focus more on building safety within mixed groups than necessarily segregating. In Canada, in 2003, they noted statistics that women in trades is about 8% compared to 92% for males. So if you graduate, you have your female-only class, you're still going to go and have to get a job where there's likely males unless you make your own business of female mechanicism or something like that. So I do love the idea of females moving in that direction. I don't necessarily think that they have to do it separate from boys, just have to build some safety in there.
Indeed. And there's always power in knowledge. Okay, I believe we have about 15 seconds each. How about a winner from each of you, or a loser? Go ahead, Karen.
For me, I'll go, our winner is, and the loser is Loblaws, but the winner is all of us because we could get up to $25 for bread price fixing if you go to CanadianBreadSettlement.ca.
All right. Danielle?
I'm going to go with losers. Environmentalists are facing a little bit of a setback with some of Mark Carney's projects, and it looks like there's a renewed focus on LNG and carbon capture potentially, although we haven't seen a specific project on that. So stay tuned.
Yeah, indeed. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you both. Hope you have an awesome weekend.
Thank you.
Take care.